has there been a official statement put out or a position on the war by the government in exile? Have you stated a policy or a position when it comes to this war officially?
Absolutely. We condemn Putin's war, Russia's war. We do all possible to bring Putin and Lukashenko to tribunal to account for this war, and we do support Ukraine. It was from the very first day of the full-scale invasion. In the first minute of the full-scale invasion, the position was strong and clear, pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian. And together with Ukrainian government, we advocate for weapons, for support, for assistance for Ukraine everywhere. We are in the same fight against the same evil. And President Zelensky often mentions Belarus. Very important words. President Zelensky said in Munich a few months ago, Munich Security Conference, he said that Europe's border, eastern border, lays on eastern border of Ukraine, in eastern border of Belarus, eastern border of Baltics. This is all Europe we have to defend together. So Ukraine understands very well not only importance, military importance of Belarus, but also geopolitical importance and Belarus relation to Europe.
Hello. This week on The Edge, we're going to be discussing a topic I've wanted to approach for quite some time. Belarus. This tiny little country just north of Ukraine is actually quite strategically important, which sadly means, in many ways like Ukraine, it has been used by larger neighbors for their own imperial design, time and time again, soaking the land in blood. You only need to look to the history of the 20th century to see how bad things can get. The Second World War was notably awful there. Just watch the film Come and See, which depicts events in that area during that time. Or you could look to the tragedy of Chernobyl, where because the air currents just happened to be flowing north on the day of the major explosion, much of the particulate went into Belarus. But more than anything else, we need to talk about Alexander Lukashenko. Often regarded as Europe's last dictator. He has been Belarus's first and only president since the dissolution of the USSR. It's as if the Soviet Union never ended. His secret police is still called the KGB, and they put down any kind of dissent quite cruelly. Notably, when the government of Lukashenko steals an election, which they have repeatedly done. Now, there is some cause for hope because following a recent rather large-scale protest of a egregious election theft, there arose a government in exile. And today we're going to be speaking to one of them. We're talking to Franak Viačorka, who is an advisor to the dynamic president in exile, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. In my humble opinion, this is an interview well worth your time watching. So, Franak Viačorka, and I'm going to warn you that I'm going to butcher every Belarusian name that I will mention in this conversation because for some reason I have trouble with Belarusian names, so I apologize in advance. But let me I've been eager to talk to somebody from Belarus for a variety of reasons, but not least of which is because I have a long history with Belarus. I actually was in Minsk in 2001 for, I guess it would have been Lukashenko's third election.
Second.
So that would have been his second election. And of course, already we knew he was a dictator and all the rest of it. And then we saw the protests come out onto the street. At that time, it was only a couple of hundreds, but he responded with violence. And in his typical KGB Soviet dictator fashion, because nothing's really changed in a lot of ways in Belarus. But many, and I mean no offense by this, many really don't know about Belarus. It's a relatively small country, strategically very important, of course, but if you don't pay attention to those kind of things, you might miss it. So tell me and tell my audience, if you wouldn't mind terribly, a little bit about the situation. What is Belarus and what is the current situation in Belarus?
Oh, thanks so much for having me. Probably in 2001, we met somewhere on Minsk streets because I was at that protest. I was at the square, and I was lucky because I was only, I think, 14 years old. Yeah, 14 years old, 13 years old back then, and police cannot detain me. So you have benefit when you're underage because the police release everyone who is under 18 years old. But I was a small boy, very active already back then. So about Belarus, basically it's a classical dictatorship which developed according to the dictator's playbook. First, he won real elections in '94. People voted for populist. Lukashenko became the leader. He dismissed parliament. He changed the constitution twice, giving him enormous how to say rights to take decisions, to sign decrees, etc. Then he cracked down on the media. He killed in '99 main political opponents, and then there was no institutions to object, to resist. And step by step, year by year, dictatorship was forming, similar to Cuban dictatorship, which already takes like 4 generations. North Korean, which already is dynasty dictatorship. But Belarus is different from this Cuba or North Korea because we never before had tradition of authoritarian ruling. In contrast to Russia, which was always authoritarian, which was always tsarist, Belarus was part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. It was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And this style, not in nature of Belarusians, when one person decides on everything. And this is why 2020 happened 5 years ago and the
Mm-hmm.
huge protests, because people just felt very unnatural and wanted change, wanted democracy, and wanted Europe in the end. But unfortunately, this we did not succeed yet.
And we'll get to 2020 in one quick second, but I also just want to reiterate how much nothing has changed in Belarus since the days of the Soviet Union. There is still KGB, it's still a police state. There are over 1,500, I believe it is, political prisoners currently. Not just as a result of what happened in 2020, because the protests I saw were hundreds. The ones that you're right, we probably were there together. It was the first time I'd really seen authoritarian crackdown with riot police and everything, and it is in my mind indelibly for probably the rest of my life because it was brutal. It was brutal. Lukashenko runs a traditional KGB police state. And so when we saw hundreds back in 2001, every year it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it culminated, as you say, in 2020, where we saw hundreds of thousands of people on the street in a relatively small country. And it was shocking. It was deeply shocking. And of course, it also saw the rise of what we both consider is the proper and legitimate president of Belarus, Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya. And she is now currently basically in government in exile. Tell me about the importance of the rise of President Tsikhanouskaya and what it means to Belarus and Belarus resistance.
Yeah, first to ask about the how it changed, since Soviet time. I think it doesn't look like Soviet Union, but the political practice of repression, it's used by the regime like in Stalin times. I call Belarus, it's like communism with a taste of cappuccino. because externally it looks very modern. You know, there was before the revolution 2020, there was McDonald's, there were like Western brands. It looks like a normal European city, like German, Polish, Czech, you know, wherever. But when you go deeper into politics, you see so many police cameras everywhere, checking phones on the entrance to metro, and basically you feel when you go deeper, not as a tourist, you feel that it's you are going back in years, you know, to 30s, and this is how USSR would look like. Stalin's USSR look like with TikTok and Instagram. This is what Belarus is. It's empowered by technologies, but technologies they serve for both. They can serve for good, they can serve for bad. And 2020 happened because we got access to internet. We got YouTube, we got TikTok, we got Telegram messaging app, and we were able to organize circumventing government censorship and control. And 2020, it was the coincidence of many factors. First, COVID, and reaction of the regime was dismissive. It made people very angry on the regime. Second, access to technology. Everyone was reading the news on Telegram messaging app. No one believed state propaganda TV. And third argument is the leader. Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya appeared suddenly, regular housewife, who just stood up for her husband, who doesn't want politics, doesn't want to be a leader. She hates political life, and she is a contrast to authoritarian, patriarchal Lukashenko's dictatorship. And these three factors, you know, they made this revolution happen, and Belarus changed forever since then. And yes, we don't see protests right now, but this mood in the society is still there. The war, which happened later in 2022, basically it suppressed the revolution because the war helped the dictator to justify repression.
Yeah, and before we move on to some other topics related to that, I do want to touch on the importance of President Tsikhanouskaya's taking to office and accepting this political life, because you're right, she's very public about the fact that she is not a politician. This kind of path was not what she chose, but rather what was chosen for her in many different ways. Nevertheless, she has blossomed into this role, and she is now one of the most recognizable faces for liberal democracy and for pushing back against Putin's authoritarianism that we see on the European stage. And so many, for some reason, seem to be women. Kaja Kallas in the EU, or Ursula von der Leyen, or, you know, there's many women seem to be taking this role, and she's certainly one of them. And she's also gotten to a point where she stands for something. What does the government in exile from Minsk, what kind of Belarus did they envision? President Tsikhanouskaya primarily amongst them.
The main goal is to give Belarusian chance for free and freedom and democracy through free and fair elections. So in 2020, the people protested under this slogan: "We want fair elections." We didn't have elections for 30 years. Lukashenko is the only politician I saw all my life. There was no competition. If some other leaders appeared, you know, they disappeared immediately or got in jail. So Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya's goal is to bring country from this point A to point B, from dictatorship to democracy, and to mobilize society, give people hope. And in exile, when she was forced with her kids to go out of the country, she, using her legitimacy received by elections 2020, she formed these institutions of power: United Transitional Cabinet, office like administration of president. It's Ukrainian model, I could say. There is a strong office of president, there is the government, and there is a parliament. And the parliament in exile, which we also have, it's elected by Belarusian community through online elections, digital tools we are using for that. And basically these three structures, they prepare Belarus for the moment of change. So when the Lukashenko is weakened, when Ukraine wins, Putin is not strong anymore, then it will be momentum for Belarus, and the structures from Exile will be able to use this new opportunity, or to call people to protest, or to organize roundtable with nomenclatura. No one knows how situation will develop, but structures are important. And this legitimacy these structures have, and Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya has, play a crucial role, because we represent alternative vision of Belarus. Two narratives. Either Belarus is a part of Russian Empire, where we will disappear and we will be subjugated, or Belarus is the part of the European community. This is what Belarusians, Moldovans, Ukrainians, Armenians want, Georgians. And this European
You
path
see
is
the
represented.
Georgians. You see the Georgians on the street every night. Of course, you see the Ukrainians fighting on the front lines to the death, in order to resist Moscow. One of the motivations, I am sure, for President Tsikhanouskaya is the fact that her husband, Sergei, is currently a political prisoner. He is in a Lukashenko prison. And he is amongst one of so many. We mentioned 1,500 is a number that is often used. And when we arranged this interview, I had racked my brain on how to address this, because there are too many cases for us to discuss. Of course, there is President Tsikhanouskaya's husband, Sergei, and I know that has there been any update on whether there's been any communication with him?
He disappeared 2 years ago in prison,
And
so we
still
don't
no
know
communication. We should don't know.
And
And the reason why I find this so infuriating and frustrating is the fact that we don't have the time. Every single human being, every single Belarusian who is in prison now at the brutal hands of the Lukashenko regime we should be talking about every single but one of them, but we don't. It's so infuriatingly, we just don't have time. We physically do not have time.
I think this story shows, how difficult it is to fight under dictatorship, how difficult choices people have to make, and how brave people who are in prisons and refuse to cooperate with the regime, despite 15, 20 years prison sentences, how brave they are. Because absolute majority of Belarusians don't cooperate, don't sign papers, resist till the very end to Lukashenko's regime. And many die. Like yesterday,
Yes.
one guy died, just because he wrote some comments pro-Ukrainian and anti-Lukashenko on social networks, sentenced to years of prison, and died young in Lukashenko's jail.
It's very sad when all of this happens, because living under Lukashenko's is living under Putin, for that matter. That kind of KGB, Soviet, Russian Empire regime is no way to live. And so it brings me back to the Ukrainian conflict here and Belarus's involvement and mood towards the conflict here in Ukraine. Can you give me a little perspective of what Belarus has been doing, Belarusians have been doing, and the attitude towards the war?
Belarusians don't support in majority the war, and it is confirmed by all surveys, and by actions. So the war of Russian aggression against Ukraine is not something which has like any resonance or support within the society. Lukashenko provided Putin with the facilities, infrastructure, territory since the very beginning, and hundreds of missiles in 2022 were launched from Belarus territory. So for Putin, it was crucial to have Belarus, because without Belarus, it's impossible to get to Kiev. It's the shortcut to Kiev. Without crossing Dnipro River, only through Belarus you can come. And Lukashenko paid with Belarusian sovereignty to Putin in exchange for political support. And Belarusians got angry on that, because basically we as country, as nation, got dragged by the dictator in the war. Dictator made us complicits in the war and guilty also in all these killings and shellings and destroyed cities. But many Belarusians resisted, and it's documented in 2022. When the first stage of the full-scale invasion started, there were at least 80 acts of sabotage. On the railways for 3 days. Russian trains were delayed on the border with Ukraine. There were some even explosions, some fires put on military places of Russians. So Belarusians demonstrated quite bravery, and even a few weeks ago, a few partisans, we call them partisans, who stopped Russian movement, they got sentenced. The sentences continue, and they all received 20, 25 years of prison, almost maximum. Not death penalty yet. We still have death penalty, but I think the scale of this resistance was quite huge all over the country, resisting Russian war. And also, we have information that Putin and Lukashenko tried to involve Belarusian army, but at some point they refused from this idea. And we believe from our sources that there was a huge resistance from mid-level and high-level officers that we don't want to go there, we will resist, we will not obey. Until now, 3 years passed, Belarusian army was not involved in the war. Yes, there were some training, drills, providing infrastructure, but not the army, which gives me hope. Which gives me hope that the army people are on the Ukrainian side, on the European side. So now our goal is to support Ukraine so much as possible. Many Belarusians joined Ukrainian armed forces, formed Kalinovsky regiment. It's the biggest international unit in the Ukrainian army. There are 3 other units formed with Belarusians in Ukrainian army. 80 Belarusian soldiers killed by Russians in the war. Our heroes, our brave heroes, including those who were on the streets in 2020. In 2020, they were at the squares. In 2022, they went to the front line to defend Ukraine, because without Ukraine's victory, without Ukraine's success, we will not have chance for democracy in Belarus. We understand it very well.
Is there? I know you have the ear of President Tsikhanouskaya. Has there been a official statement put out, or a position on the war by the government in exile? Have you stated a policy or a position when it comes to this war officially?
Absolutely. We condemn Putin's war, Russia's war. We do all possible to bring Putin and Lukashenko to tribunal to account for this war. And we do support Ukraine. It was from the very first day of the full-scale invasion. This war started in February 2022, and Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya was speaking at that moment in the Senate of France. In the first minute of the full-scale invasion, the position was strong and clear, pro-Ukrainian and anti-Russian. And together with the Ukrainian government, we advocate for weapons, for support, for assistance for Ukraine everywhere. Everywhere. And Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, just a few days ago, we were in Tirana at the European Political Community Summit, where President Tsikhanouskaya was there, Zelensky, Merz, Macron, and we spoke with every leader. And we also, my president, she greeted President Zelensky. I see that they have quite good relationship. I think, we are in the same boat. We are in the same fight against the same evil. And President Zelensky often mentions Belarus. Very important words President Zelensky said in Munich a few months ago, Munich Security Conference. He said that Europe's border, eastern border, lays on eastern border of Ukraine, in eastern border of Belarus, eastern border of Baltics. This is all Europe we have to defend together. So Ukraine understands very well not only military importance of Belarus, but also geopolitical importance and Belarus relation to Europe.
These are very good words to hear, all of that. I want to touch on one quick other thing when we're talking about the border and Belarus being the military perhaps being used against Ukrainians. It is my belief, and I would like your response to this, that another reason, aside from the fact that maybe Belarusian soldiers are reluctant to shoot Ukrainian soldiers, seeing the good relations that have existed, but also Lukashenko uses the Belarusian army to suppress his people. If they were to cross the border and become involved in the Ukrainian war, what would the people of Belarus who rose up in 2020 by the hundreds of thousands as their soldiers were, leaving Belarus. Would a vacuum encourage another uprising, do you think? This is what I'd like
Uh,
you to
I yeah,
respond to.
I heard this version. I heard that Lukashenko is afraid to send soldiers because he will be defenseless. But in Belarus there are two types of troops. There is the regular army, where I
Hmm.
also served 15 years ago mandatorily, this obligatory Soviet style service. And there is the internal army. It's a
Yes.
KGB, special forces to disperse protests. And these are very different people. Regular army was never supported by the regime. It's not well equipped. It's not trained. It's not motivated at all, and it's quite small. It will not make any big change on the front or in the
Hmm.
war against Ukraine. But internal army, all these troops, to beat women, to stop protesters, to arrest them, it will be useless in the war because they are
Hmm.
only trained to beat their own citizens. So even if he'll send, this internal army, to Ukraine, it will not change the situation, only spark the resistance. If he'll send regular army, it will create the new unrest in Belarus because army doesn't want this, and probably army will turn not to Kiev but to Minsk, to Lukashenko's residency. So
See, this
they
is
are
another
afraid.
thing that I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, uh, but we do hear a lot, if not the Belarusian army, we hear, and it comes every couple of months, that the Russians are going to line up on the border, with between Belarus and Ukraine. They're going to send Russian troops. They're going to open up another front. The rumors happen every couple of months. Um, what are your thoughts on the potential of Russian troops using Belarusian territory again to perhaps open up another front in the Ukrainian war?
Not excluding, because it's possible. They are preparing now the massive drills in the fall, Zapad
Mm-hmm.
2025, which took place regularly before, very anti-Western military drills and anti-Ukrainian. They trained, how to say, they drilled possible war with Poland and Lithuania before. Yeah, these drills means that many Russian soldiers will come to Belarus. As in 2020, it was 50,000 Russian soldiers on Belarus territory, and then drills over, and the war started. So it's possible, but right now we don't see Putin strong enough in terms of opening new front. He is hardly for him. It is hard to keep even the current front line. Ukraine resists very bravely, very in sophisticated way. So I don't think that it's possible today or this year. The opening or again the how to say the attack from Belarus territory, but some provocations could be. And the very fact of drills during the war, the drills on the border with Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, it's a pressure. It's a part of PSYOPs, psychological informational operations. Also, in order to force Poland and Lithuania invest in own security, in own border defense, than to give weapons to Ukraine. Distract resources, distract attention. And this is what Putin and Lukashenko are doing. But in case if there will be escalation, in case if Putin will go all in, let's say, it's not excluded that they will attack not Ukraine. They can do something with Baltics, because there is this geographical Suwalki Gap thing, few dozen
Yes.
kilometers, which connects Kaliningrad region and Belarus. And if Russian army takes this Suwalki Gap, basically they cut off three Baltic states from the land by land from Europe. And this is what worries military generals in NATO, in European Union, and also our team, this escalation. Because when it happens, it will be very difficult to prevent the bigger war. But if any involvement of Belarus happens, I'm sure that we will be resisting. Our partisans will get involved. Railways the most opposition organization in Belarus, Railway Corporation. I think they will play their role too. So we will make sure that Russians will not be comfortable in Belarus.
Yeah, I have no doubt of that. But as somebody who's living in Kiev, obviously it's a concern to us. But look, moving aside from the war, you mentioned there Lukashenko and Putin working hand in hand. And I have to ask, you know, is Belarus even really sovereign? And I don't mean that in any kind of offensive way. I mean that because there is no Lukashenko without Putin. Putin has repeatedly drawn up these plans to, in essence, remove Belarus sovereignty. Again, as a proud Belarusian, is it sovereign currently?
Formally, yes. De facto, no. We call it hybrid occupation or surrogate occupation or creeping occupation, because formal there are signs of sovereignty. Yes, there is there is a formal border. There is a separate institutions of power, pocket parliament of Lukashenko, but de facto all the decisions, political, foreign policy, economy, is taken in Moscow, not in Minsk. The only thing Lukashenko controlled in Belarus is repression, basically repression against Belarusians. So I don't think there are elements of sovereignty. Still, it's savable. Still, it's possible to get out of Russia. But more time passes, more Russian presence in Belarus, more Russian economy integrates Belarus, it becomes more and more difficult. And very important information space. That, you know, they closed many independent media, arrested many journalists, and Russian propaganda came in, and they work effectively to brainwash people. This is why we invest so much time and resources right now to deliver information to Belarusians inside the country through social networks, internet, so much as possible to resist this Russian narrative. The Russians do in Belarus same what they do on occupied territories in Ukraine, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in Crimea, basically the same practice to destroy identity, to destroy civil society, to destroy any forms of dissent. But in Belarus, still they did not succeed yet. But you know, time, I'm not sure the time plays on our hand. I think longer time, you know, more Russia is there, and this makes me very concerned.
Well, you see it all around the former Soviet Union and the former empire. It's what they do. They divide and conquer. They spread disinformation. They try to suppress national identity, national language, national culture. Um, but Moscow receives something in return that's very important to them, and I wonder if we can talk about that now, is that Lukashenko provides Putin with deniability, with a cloak that he can operate not only to break, say, the sanctions, but also on the diplomatic stage, whether it's a vote in the UN or putting forward some sort of proposal that is clearly out of the Kremlin, but Lukashenko will propose it as though it's his own. He's basically pulled, the strings are pulled, but that's very useful for Moscow. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Lukashenko's role in that perspective.
Yeah, it's a like satellite state. You know, during Second World War, there was a Petain, which is France, and there was Berlin, which basically France formally sovereign, but played, you know, Berlin's role during Second World War. So similar combination they have right now, and they play it on international arena. Belarus officially votes same as Russia everywhere at every international platform. Also, Putin used Lukashenko to show that it's not only about Russia. We have allies. We have Lukashenko's Belarus here. Also, Iran supports us, North Korea. So present themselves as coalition. Plus, it is used for internal Russian audience. That you see, Belarus supports, you know, our actions in Ukraine because Ukraine is naughty child and Lukashenko is good guy. He understands that we have to put Ukraine in place. But Lukashenko does not defend Belarusian interest. Absolutely zero Belarusian interest in his actions. So he serves only only Putin. And on international arena, but also on domestic arena, repressions are in favor of Putin, and Putin is happy that he doesn't have to do this. Plus trade, they help each other to circumvent sanctions. On Russia, sanctions on imports, on Belarus on exports. So they buy stuff for Russia through Belarus, and they sell Belarusian stuff through Russia using these sanction loopholes. So these guys have symbiotic relationship. They need each other, and Putin needs Lukashenko badly too, because it's a cheap way to control Belarus, and no one else will play such role as Lukashenko for Putin.
And he often, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about this as well. He also often acts as an intermediary. So he'll be the one that goes to Tehran to make arrangements for drones, or he'll go to Xi and talk about, a variety, take your pick about, international issues. Talk to me a little bit about how the puppet Lukashenko is used as somebody to get to these other powers, whether it's Pyongyang or Tehran or what have you.
He's just playing the role of Putin's spokesperson, messenger, envoy. I don't think he has much own legitimacy. Of course, Lukashenko wants to be visible. He wants to be with world leaders. He uses every opportunity, but no one wants to meet him. So he was in, I think, in the Emirates on the COP, this climate conference globally, but no one wanted to see him. No one wanted to shake his hand. And he suffers a lot, that he is disrespected and no one takes him seriously. But Putin tries to open some spaces for him, invites him to parades, to international events, put him on media in Russia, and Lukashenko is happy about that. And I don't think we will be able to divide these two brothers, because they're brothers in crime, because blood's on their hands, and they committed together so many crimes that they will be holding each other, till the very, very end. And Lukashenko, I think he will fall first. Changes in Belarus much more plausible, in my opinion, than in Russia. Russia is more difficult, imperial thinking, society pro-war, and Belarus is a completely different context and story. And if changes in Belarus happen, if Lukashenko starts to fall, it can also spark changes in Russia. Like in 2020, protests in Belarus sparked protests in Khabarovsk, some other Russian cities. So this is why we propose, to see Belarus not only as the problem, but also as possible a part of the solution for situation, and make Belarus can become a success story, and try to make it success story and example also for Russian transformation.
We can certainly hope, and those of us who are here in Ukraine, or those who are on the streets of Rustaveli, or in Tallinn, or wherever, we're all hoping for that thing. But no one lives forever, and this is another. We'll wind it down here with a couple of more questions, but no one lives forever, and both Putin and Lukashenko share a similar problem in that they are not young men. They don't seem, either of them, to be in particularly good health. How long can they hang on, and how can they, in a worst case scenario, because I agree with you, I think ultimately they will fall, but in a world where Lukashenko and Putin, notably Lukashenko, survives this current chaos, what future does that hold for Belarus, a Lukashenko Belarus?
Without Lukashenko, system will not survive. It was shaped and built.
His sons are not going to work. Okay.
It will not be Azerbaijani scenario. It will not be even Kazakh scenario. It will not be dynasty power transfer. It's impossible in Belarus. The system was designed exclusively for one person, where this one person decides on everything. And even if Lukashenko was sick, systems start to disrupt, to glitch. We saw it before during these 30 years. So without physical presence of Lukashenko, there will be immediate change. And our goal will be to use this momentum to turn Belarus in the right direction, to the West, to democracy, to freedom. Lukashenko is old. For Belarusian man, where lifespan is quite short, he is already long-living man. But I always encourage Belarusians not to hope only on his health, because dictators usually use the best healthcare, best drugs, etc. But this also might be the case. This might happen unexpectedly. He is much slower right now. He appears in media few days per week only. It's not Lukashenko 30 years ago, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, like Hugo Chavez, broadcasting every minute. No, it's already quite slow man, and he speaks already about way out. But he's afraid even to say that there will be successor, because immediately this successor will take power from him. He's afraid. So his sons are weak enough, and they are not ready for that. So I think with Lukashenko gone, the system will be gone too. The question is how we will be ready for that. Will we be enough prepared? Will the West be ready to embrace Belarus? Not allow Putin or who else after Putin, to fix control over our country.
Yeah. Let's certainly hope so. What can the West do? What can both governments and individuals do to support and show their help, or provide help, show their support for Belarus?
So we don't ask to fight instead of us. It's our goal. So ourselves, we try to be organized both inside the country and in exile. What we ask international community, first of all, to distinguish Belarusian democratic free Belarus and Lukashenko's regime. It's very important to see, like Minister Landsbergis, Lithuanian former minister, said, moral sovereignty. Belarusians have moral sovereignty. This is very important because it gives people hope. Second, people must believe that change is possible. And success stories, especially from Ukraine or from Moldova on European integration, give people hope. And we always ask to mention that Belarus' future is also European. Belarus also will have chance to get back to Europe, to get back to Europe and join European Union. The messaging matters a lot. Third, it's important to support media, independent media and civil society, human rights, everyone who fights on the ground. This assistance exists from European Union now. US withdrawn any support, but the EU is doing fantastic work. On Putin, Belarus on the agenda. And we are super grateful, and to Kaya Kallas and to previous Representative Borrell, for this very consistent position. Sanctioning Lukashenko, sanctioning economically, sanctions individuals, everything matters, and bringing to accountability. This is what Ukrainians do with Putin. We do the same with Lukashenko. In every single international court, ICJ, ICC, to make a case against Lukashenko. So people around him see that this guy is toxic. This guy is out. This guy is done. And they must see that there is no future with Lukashenko, and then it will create another dynamic within the nomenclatura. So these are main messages, and these are main goals. What democratic forces are doing. Our task is to mobilize people on the ground, keep them inspired, but without allies, it is always very difficult.
Just second to last question, how concerned are you of the potential of a U.S. withdrawal from engagement in Europe?
It's big change. I think it's dangerous for Belarus and Ukraine primarily, because it can untie hands to Putin. Of course, Europe must be stronger. Europe must develop its defense capability and strengthen unity within the alliance and be stronger on supporting Ukraine. But if this happens, that will be a big challenge to European Union, but also to our nations. We always saw United States as the beacon, freedom, democracy. They were always the pillar of democracy support, and this is why all dictators believe that behind every protest there is American hand. It's not a Belarusian case, but many Belarusians looked at America actually as example. So if America withdrawn, of course it will be more difficult for us. But on the other hand, we have European Union and we have Ukraine, which is stronger, which is freer, which is dedicated, consistent, and I hope that Ukraine, no matter how these peace talks go, Ukraine will not make deals with Lukashenko, but Ukraine will always remember his crimes and will help us to get Belarus to democracy.
Well, I certainly hope so. And I certainly hope, as an American citizen, that we do not do what we fear is on the horizon. And just to close out here, if you will indulge me, Franak, and this is unabashedly self-indulgent, but I want to tell my American audience in particular that there is a history between Belarus and America, and we owe an awful lot to people from your part of the world who, back in the War of Independence, the American Revolutionary War, stood strongly with the 13 colonies. And many of us, of course, know the Marquis de Lafayette or Rochambeau, the Frenchman. Some of us may know Casimir Pulaski, especially those of us who are of Midwestern descent, who fought against the tyranny of the czars. But I want to point out somebody in particular, and please, I thank you for your patience. But it's important my audience hears this when we talk about Belarus. There was also a son of Belarus by the name of Tadeusz, and you're going to have to excuse me, Kashkishko. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Tadeusz Kashkishko?
Tadeusz Kostyuszka.
Oh boy.
Tadeusz Kostyuszka. Yeah, it's fine. See? It's fine. Everyone
who was born in what is today Belarus, but he stood up against the czars in the same revolutionary spirit of the American experiment and was beaten badly, sadly. He went to the 13 colonies. He fought in the Battle of Saratoga, and if it wasn't for him, we possibly would not have our own independence and our breakaway from the empire. We need to repay the favor. We owe Belarus, not least of which because of Tadeusz. So I say this all because I strongly believe it, and I believe in your country, and I believe in your independence. I believe in Ukraine's independence. But I ask a favor, if you would, the next time you talk to your president, tell her that this American, a couple of years ago, witnessed her laying flowers at the monument of Tadeusz Kościuszko, and I'm going to keep butchering it. I'm going to give it up. And it deeply moved me. So if you would be so kind as just to relay the message that there are Americans out there who do know the importance of Belarus, know the sacrifice, know the story, know why you're fighting, and what Moscow is. So I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you. I visited in my native Michigan the monument that we have at Detroit to him, and I think he is a hero to the American Revolution, a hero to the people of Belarus, and a reason why I believe our peoples are connected at the hip. Is there anything you would like to say to my audience before we draw this to a close?
I just want to say thanks to everyone who supports Ukraine, who supports Belarus and the freedom fight globally, because it's not local one, it's a global fight. I ask to be active, to cherish what you have, those who live in democracy, because freedom is the thing which is easy to lose and very difficult to get it back.
Well, God bless a free and sovereign Belarus. We all hope that it'll happen sooner than later.
Thank you.
Thank you.